Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElmurray.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. I can't remember the last time we had a total of 4 people on this podcast, because we have 2 guests today. Daniel Agee? We talked about this before. Daniel Agee. Daniel Agee, who was with us before when he worked for Glass. He no longer works for Glass, and he has created a small publishing company to publish books of photographs called Good Fight. Nothing to do with the TV series, which he never heard about until I mentioned it before. And we also have Markus Naarttijärvi, whose book is the first publication by Good Fight. It's called A Surrender. Daniel, good to have you back. Markus, good to meet you. This is a Sisyphean task, creating a photo book publishing company. Why have you done this, Daniel?
Well, I mean, it's no more Sisyphean than launching a photo sharing platform in the year of our Lord 2021, you know? So I got used to the struggle of photography and just wanted to apply it in a different way. So like the genesis of Good Fight actually came out of Glass. We had started seeing that there were a handful of photographers on the platform who were using the platform to exponentially grow the quality of the work, the expansiveness of the work, and really like lean into photography as their main creative outlet. Markus was the most obvious and largest member doing that. And so we wanted to, I personally, as a human being, really love photo books, really love publishing, really love the creation process of like taking a large photographic body and turning it into a physical object is like really challenging. I've been making zines for years and, you know, just wanted to like take that extra step as a part of our community work at Glass. And so in 2023, I started working on what we were going to call Glass Press at the time. And over the course of that year, while working on it, it became pretty clear that like, maybe I was biting off a little more than I could chew, and that like this thing grew out of this small seed into a significantly larger idea, where we decided after, you know, fast forward 18 months, and it became pretty clear that I was going to have to choose if I was going to launch a photo book publisher or if I was going to continue on working at Glass. And when we launched series at Glass, it felt like a natural off-ramp for me, you know, like that we got this platform to a really beautiful place where a lot of the stuff that I was doing could be absorbed by Tom and Stefan, and that I could step out into this Good Fight. Ha! See what I did there, guys? I named it an action. And so Markus and I had started working on his book with the intention of publishing it in Glass Press. We started talking about that in late 2023 and, you know, worked through the year. And then like halfway through the year, it became pretty clear that like this was going to be its own thing. I brought on my partner, Andre Mora. He's based in Seattle. I met him at the Glass photo walk back in 2022, and he and I hit it off. And it was like pretty clear that I was going to make books with him at some point. He's a designer and a print designer by trade, and I was like, hell yeah, this guy. And so I sent him a text, and I was like, hey, what if we just started our own little publishing company? And he said, great. And I said, Markus, what if instead of publishing this through Glass, we published it through this little publishing company? He said, hell yeah. And, you know, tens of thousands of dollars later and a lot of misery and amazing, great product exists.
I want to talk about the production and the cost without getting into details later, because that's one of the biggest problems with photo books is the cost of printing good books. But first, Markus, you're in the north of Sweden, and if I first thought you were Finnish because of a Finnish name, but that's not correct. And if I look at your book, it looks like a book of photos from someone who was in the north of Sweden or the north of Norway or Finland or whatever. There's snow, lots of snow everywhere. There's darkness. There's a lot of resonance with the photos of Todd Heido and Alex Soth. What are your influences?
Thank you. Well, you named 2 of them. I think Yeah, those two are clear. Alex Soth was like, in terms of photo books, Alex Soth was a clear like one of the first people when I looked at his books that was like, this is something I want to do. So in terms of photo books, absolutely. I'm quite a late discoverer of Heido. Daniel was partly responsible to turning me on to him. So when I saw his work, it resonated with me, of course, because there are similarities. But otherwise, I'm drawn to a number of different photographers. There's an excellent Swedish photographer whose name just now fell out of my head, but that has documented this portion of Sweden, like in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. Sune Jonsson, who I'm very fond of, but he very much documented the people. If you look through my book, there's a complete absence.
No. I see a photo of a woman, a sort of a silhouette of a woman in front of a full moon. There's a person.
All
there.
right, yeah. There are very few identifiable people.
Yeah, no faces.
No, not as subjects.
Yeah. There's also a sort of William Eggleston look to a lot of these photos. A lot of them are banal type scenes that. I've said on this podcast many times, what a photographer does is he chooses where the four corners of the frame are. And Eggleston has the way of looking at the most boring things and putting those four corners to make things stand out in a way that is surprising. And there are a number of photos in here that remind me of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I'm very drawn to environments that other people tend to avoid. Industrial areas is my favorite thing. It's a weird little thing I have. And I think it's fascinating to see them in different lights and different weathers and go back and try to make something beautiful out of those environments. So yeah.
I think like a really nice thing that happened over the course of this project was that like it started as a 365 project on glass, and then grew into a 730 project, and then grew into a 1,000-day project. And now Markus has been taking a photo every day for over 1,200 days. And so I got to know his work over the course of that first 365 project, and through, highlighting his work to the greater community, but also through our own friendship, was able to like help provide a editor's voice of like, hey, these are the things that you're doing that are actually great. Like focus on this. And, keep focusing on these like areas. And Markus, to his credit, was like, amazing. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, let's go. And so like just kept doing every single thing so much better than I thought he would, so much faster, that like that's why we had to kick into high gear, that we were going to like launch Glass Press, which then became Good Fight, was like, we got to keep up with Markus's pace. Like I didn't think we were going to be publishing a book until sometime like late this year. But joke's on us. Markus was like, well, I'm going to keep getting better. And, I've got letters of intent over here from other publishers. So what can you do for me, man? And I was like, oh, hard bargain. Absolutely nothing. Let's no. So, like,
I didn't frame it just like that. There was some subtlety.
Yes, there was Swedish subtlety. I apologize for my American retelling.
Yeah. How long have you been taking photographs, Markus?
I started as a teenager.
You look relatively young, at least compared to Jeff and I.
Yeah, I'm 43 something, if I remember correctly. No, I started actually as a teenager. My aunt was working as a reporter for a local newspaper, and she got me hooked on photography. I stole my mother's camera and I never gave it back. And then I started early on as a teenager working for a local paper where I lived. And then at that time, it was a mandatory military service for Swedes. We had a defense back then. We're trying to get one again. So I did my military service at this newspaper for enlisted men as a photographer. So we made a complete magazine every 3 weeks and published it. And after that, I worked as a professional photographer or a photojournalist for, I think it's better part of 3 years or something like that after that. But then the job market for that was impossible in the north of Sweden. So eventually I just left it behind and went to university and ended up in academia.
What do you academe?
I'm a professor of constitutional law.
Okay. Good to know.
Swedish constitution. For our American listeners,
imagine,
there are more than one constitution.
I know. Why the title A Surrender?
Yeah.
Great question. Thanks for asking. No,
it's supposed to be serious.
This is serious. You managed to pick the hardest thing that took us the longest thing. If you were like the design or the open spine or the paper, whatever, I'd be like, perfect answer, easy breezy. The name is messy. It took us a really long time. We worked on naming it for 18 months. It was one of the first things we talked about, and it was the last thing that was done. So it started as, Markus had a project code name for it, which was Hinterland, and that felt a little too literal for the body of work. It matched and ended up becoming the title for his GFX project. Markus won the Global GFX grant in 2023, which means that the show happened in 2024. Fuji, if you're listening, please line up the numbers for the grants to be in the year that they're happening, not the year they're awarded. It drives everyone, me included, insane. And that was the name of that project. And so we were able to leave and celebrate Hinterland as a project over here for the industrial transformation of the north of Sweden, which meant that we needed to really work on finding a name that fit the body of work that we pulled out of his 1200-day project. And that took us a really, really long time. It was a song lyric for a really long time, Through the Darkness and the Pleasure, which is a line from one of Marcus's favorite bands, Madrugada. It's Norwegian band, right? They're great. Yeah,
from
big,
the north of
legitimately
Norway.
big fan.
Perfect.
We can send you the link to Marcus's sad boy music that he listens to every time he goes out to take photos. It's beautiful. But that too felt too literal, and we kept finding ones that two of us liked and one of us weren't wild about. So for the longest time, I wanted An Invitation as the title as opposed to A Surrender. The whole purpose of the title and the cover was we wanted to introduce people to the work in a very direct way. We wanted people, if they picked up the book based on the cover, they knew they would like what's in there. So we chose a very sparse, very minimal photo, very cold, very dark, on purpose. I've actually had a couple of stockists email me and be like, yeah, sure, let's talk about stocking the book, but why did you pick this cover? It's a little, I had a Spaniard call it boring. And I was like, it's not boring. It's it is a representation of the work that's going to be in there. And if you want to look at that, you're going to want to look at that from the cover. And so we went back and forth on the title for 18 months. And then it kind of unlocked a month before we went to press. I am a recreational marijuana user. And I realized that I had never actually seen the final performance of Elvis. Elvis is a character that pops up in the book at one point. He's in, a photograph. And I had never seen Elvis's final performance of the thing. And I was stoned in bed, falling asleep. And I was like, I should watch that. And I pulled it up and it was midnight. On the East Coast, and I watched the performance of Elvis singing. What is it? Which is the final one that made us weep accidentally?
My memory is so bad. Unchained Melody. Yeah,
Unchained Melody. When he performs Unchained Melody and is barely standing, pretty clearly on something, just like falling apart as a human being. And like, you can tell that he's pretty close to death. And then he starts singing, and it's just like the most overwhelming, beautiful performance of a song that kind of exists. And that was like legitimately the first time I'd ever seen or listened to an Elvis song. I grew up in a religious household, so I wasn't allowed that hip shaking music. And it just like blew me away. And I sent it to Andre and I sent it to Marcus and was like, look at this, guys. And Marcus wrote back and was like, oh, holy shit, cool. I guess I'll get a cry at like 7 a.m. while I'm getting ready for work. But what about Elvis titles? What about an Elvis song title? What about Elvis? And so we looked through his discography, and Surrender is one of his album names. And so we did what all great artists do and stole it wholesale.
Yeah. We should say also that when we found the title and we started looking at the book through that title, it explained a lot, and it really sort of resonated with the work in a way that the previous titles had not. So it sort of unlocked a lot of good things in how we view the work.
Did the title change what you had in the book? Like, did that cause you to think, all right, well, now some of these pictures don't really fit anymore, and maybe these others would be a better fit? Like, where were you in the selection process there?
No.
Yeah, we had already gone through that. We had already gone through that with the original shift from Hinterland to something else. Of, you know, like when Marcus and I originally started talking about his book, he was thinking that this was a book about the industrial transformation of northern Sweden, right? Like, here are factories in a bunch of different ways. Here's some nature on the edges. Great. And I was like, yep, that's interesting, and people will buy that book. But like, the thing that speaks to me about your work is actually like the, you know, impermanence that exists and how you view human persistence in these situations, right? Like we mentioned this, there's a line in the documentary that we made for Marcus's book where he talks about every like dilapidated house is someone's dream. And like, that's a really beautiful thing. It's really hard to view that beautifully, but once you like flip that switch to, you know, everything's impermanent, nothing's here forever, and you can still appreciate the stuff that exists, and you can appreciate it in its collapsing state, it made so much other stuff make sense. Because like, I didn't want to view Marcus's work through the lens of sadness, which is one of the things that we kept coming to with the title, and we're trying to solve with the title, is like, this isn't a sad work. This is hopeful. This is a beautiful thing. This is someone singing a wonderful, amazing song right before they die. This is someone like going out into the darkest, coldest parts of the world and making something gorgeous. And there's so much joy and happiness and love that's in that, but it's really hard to see. And so it's like, how do we frame it in a way that someone will come up with that and notice that emotion? And we're like, okay, we're surrendering to, you know, you surrender to the winter, you surrender to time, as soon as you start like surrendering control to things, you have a lot better time going with the flow. In the same way that like the photo book is very literally a fall to summer time. So like, when you open the work, you're starting to see photos from the fall. It very quickly becomes winter, and then you're just like in the thick and darkness of winter, and then you come out of it and, you know, it's all sunshine and rainbows. And like, that's kind of amazing and beautiful, but it's like, how do you get someone into the state where like that is a journey they want to take? And we started with the title and went from there. Ended with the title, I guess.
So Marcus, you shot this on Fujifilm GFX cameras?
Yeah, mostly. I started out using a Sony A7R IV for the first 90% of my photography. And then because I got this beautiful grant from Fujifilm, they were gracious enough to loan me
they didn't even give it to
camera and some lenses. No, they
Okay.
He gave me a lot of things. I shouldn't complain. There was some money, a trip to Tokyo, an exhibition, things like that. So I didn't have it in my heart to beg for a camera as well. So I used that for about 6 months during the duration of that project, and then just fell in love with it. And luckily, by the time I had to give it back, they released the GFX 100S2, which I got a good price on.
Because as I look at some of these photos, there are different aspect ratios, and some of them are larger, covering a page and a half, that say to me medium format, and others are a more standard aspect ratio. Is that because you shot them on a different camera? No. It's just the way you cropped.
No, that's a creative choice. It's all of these are more than big enough to print in this book. But let's say the GFX system has some advantages when it comes to cropping and printing for exhibitions and things like that.
Yeah, like we did a full run through editing process of we re-edited every photo that's in the book, because how Markus traditionally edits is quickly for uploading to the internet right before bed, which is a beautiful way to share work. It is not a beautiful way to create the best photo possible. And so we spent a lot of time, like weeks and weeks at re-editing every photo. And, I'm a GFX shooter myself. And, man, the half of the photos that we had to edit that were the Sony files were rough compared. Like the GFX files are just such a joy to edit. And, like
I actually have to just say one thing. It's not, I'm Daniel is completely correct. It's a remarkable difference between the files, but I actually had a problem with that, because when I shifted from Sony to Fujifilm, I'm colorblind. I should say that I'm like quite severely colorblind. Daniel can tell you about how bad it was. I haven't had a problem with that because I shoot RAW. So the color balance is just you tweak the color or the color balance a little bit. You don't have or color temperature, so you don't have to go in and fix the individual colors normally. But because I shoot a lot in the dark and I shoot a lot in the winter, there's a limited color scale, right? There's black and there's dark blue and there's some white. And when I shifted from Sony to Fujifilm, the GFX sensor just retained so much more color information in those dark scenes that I was sort of freaked out, because I had just started this project for Fujifilm, like for their exhibition. And I realized I don't know how to edit these files. There's so much color left in these dark scenes, and I don't know if they're correct. They could be purple, they could be blue. I have no idea. So that process of learning to use that additional information in the sensor really threw me for a while. But luckily I had Daniel guide me through each and every color balancing for the print, at least.
If you're colorblind, why wouldn't you be shooting monochrome?
Yeah, I tried many times. I've always felt like my life would be so much easier if I did that. But I really love color, even in the winter and in the dark when there's very very little of the color there. I still, every time I try to do it black and white, I tend to go back.
Yeah, so we've been developing multiple different projects. Markus and I are, through this process have become incredibly close. And so we are probably each other's first readers on any new work of like, hey, I made this photo. Does this suck? Back and forth forever. And we've been developing Markus's next project for his next book. And he originally started it as a black and white project. He was like, yeah, I think this is going to fit really well in black and white, and took some amazing black and white photos and was like, yeah, running down that thing. And now 6 months later has gone back to the original first batch of photos that he made. And it's like, color. So he's not lying. He has tried multiple times of Monochrome
because
should be the way.
I'm also thinking of another Swedish photographer, Jerry Johansson, who shoots industrial black and white square all the time, which I would say is much less interesting than your photos, but he's got a look that he's established and that he's maintained throughout. When I look at your photos, you said that the only colors are like black and white and blue in winter, but there's an awful lot of color in these photos, which maybe you didn't notice. I'm just joking. But they're not just winter photos. There are houses that are painted red. No. There's a colorful sunset. There's bright lights. There's a wonderful picture that I really like. I'm just scrolling through here of trails of lights from cars going on a highway. You've got the snow in the foreground, the highway on a small embankment, some trees, the dark sky, and you've got a long enough exposure to have the trails, the red and white trails. So there's more color than what you think of as Swedish winter, and particularly from what you described.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you do want some pop of color there once in a while, and there are photos taken in the daytime as well, in the summer even.
Dreadful.
But yeah, I just there's clearly a main theme of like dark blue. I would still say. But yeah, I tried doing black and white. I just can't, and the reason is that there is a particular color scale to Swedish winter that I really like, and also that contrast between that and when the light returns, because it's like night and day, literally. So
no, I mentioned before we started recording, I spent a year in Oslo in Norway, and I remember how dark the winter was when the sun went down by 3 p.m. When the sun rose at 11 a.m. and went down at 3 p.m. And when the spring came back, it came quickly. The change, it's not overnight, but the change was, I remember we went from Oslo to Stockholm for a weekend, I think in April, and we came back, everything was in bloom and the sun was out, and it was like overnight it just happened. And it's true that the colors that you get in Scandinavia in the winter when you're out skiing and it's dark and gloomy, and then all of a sudden summer, everything's just so bright, more brighter than you think you deserve.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very short spring. It's winter,
it's a long
and then
winter,
summer. Yeah,
pretty long summer, and spring and fall are like long weekends, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's next? What's next for Good Fight? What's next for Markus?
That's a great question.
Okay, you don't have to answer, Daniel.
No, I'm
just opening the door here to you promoting your next project.
So, well, that might be changing, like this week. So if you had asked me that question on Friday, I would have said, well, we're currently working on my book, which we are, and my book will be coming, sometime this year, probably in the summer. It is dependent on, a handful of grants I've applied to, how well Markus's book continues to sell, and then how much money I can save, because publishing is expensive as hell. Can we swear on this podcast? Because I almost said a bad word.
Absolutely.
It is expensive as shit, guys. It is so expensive to make a great book.
And this is one of the reasons that photo books are really difficult, because you can't afford to do a large print run. And if you sell out your first print run, it's a big risk to do another print run, because if all of a sudden it stops selling, you've got piles of books on your hand. And the photo book market is such that even well-known photographers, they'll publish books and there'll be a few hundred copies and they'll go out of print, and then they're worth a ton of money on the secondary market because the publishers can't take the risk of doing second or third printings.
Yeah. So like I'm a photo book collector. If this was a video podcast, you'd be able to see the very extensive library behind me. And I love the art form. I just think it's a perfect representation of everything that makes photography great. And so when we started Good Fight, we were like, okay, let's focus on the project. Like, let us make the project what the project wants to be. The Good Fight is not the only way I make money. And there are a lot of grants that exist. And Andre is a really great, capable freelance designer, and people are hiring him all the time. And so like we didn't have to make the maximum amount of dollars per book. And so to have that freedom to like make the best book possible that presented the work in the best way, freed us up from a handful of constraints. But like, to be clear, this is still a substantial investment. We spent, I would say, with part of Good Fight was that we wanted to promote the work a lot harder than what we see other photo book publishers putting forth effort for, right? Like, unless you're Alex South or Todd Hido, chances are you're not getting a lot of actual promotional help from your publisher. So traditional publishing works in a way where, as the photographer, you approach a publisher, you say, hi, I have this work, you pitch them. 9 times out of 10, they say no. And
I'd say 98 times out of 100, they say no.
Yeah, I'm trying to be generous here because they are my peers.
Yes.
And like, it's one of those things where everyone's doing this and some people are trying to change it. Some people are doing well. And then when that 2 times out of 100 that they say yes, they say, okay, great. How are you paying for it? Because you, as the photographer, are often expected to bring forth the $10,000 to $20,000 to print your book. Yep. You pay for it. Out of that, you get a handful of copies, like 20 to 30 copies of the book, and that's it. You don't get money from it. And if you do, it's a couple $1,000. You will never break even as a photographer going to a traditional photographer house, publishing house, and getting your book printed from them. It is truly a labor of love that then also opens you up for other things, right? So because you're now a published author, you can get into galleries a little more easily. You can sell prints of your own work on your own website, etc. So you have more avenues to revenue, but your book will never be a moneymaker. That's why someone like Deadbeat Club out of LA will say things like, there's no money in photo books. Like, it's their tagline, because there's like very little money in photo books. And so,
but
because
as you say, it's a portfolio. It's a business card to get you to do other things, to get commercial work, to get exhibits, etc.
Yeah, and so, as a publisher, we want to make money. Like, I'm in business to make money here, but it's not the only reason I'm in business. I'm in business to celebrate works like A Surrender and works like the thing that I'm making for myself, and like have a place to put that. And so that's all like, we spent $20,000 producing Markus's book between printing it and the documentaries costs for me flying to Sweden again and filming with him for a week and all of the costs that are associated with that. And then there's, that is not counting the startup costs of Good Fight. So like, we're talking like a substantial, close to $30,000 that we've spent getting to this point. If we sell out of Markus's book, we will maybe make about that much, right? Like, this is not this is not a huge money making thing. And people are like, well, it costs $85. I'm like, well, yeah, it's 120 pages. It's 69 photos. It's a very perfectly made little book, and it's worth
Yet
that.
There's only 500 copies, so selling out still isn't a lot of money.
Yeah. And like, selling out is hard. Like, we've been out for, I don't know, like a month now. And we're at like 15 or 20% sold. And like, that's amazing. That's a beautiful launch, especially at what feels like the end of the world, or at least the end of America, and like the collapse of the economy. And like, there's not a lot of, not to get all existential or whatever, but like, people aren't spending money on art at the moment because they're worried about spending money on food. And so to like have this response at this time, it feels beautiful. And so like to answer your question, what's next? I don't know, man. I toured
depends on what you sell, and
Well, I also toured a gallery space in Baltimore yesterday that I'm thinking of renting to start a Good Fight gallery. So we can do shows for people that for books that we publish, and then Baltimore has an incredible photography scene, and there's no photography specific gallery that exists And so I'm like, what's another extra
hard could that
$1,500 a month? How hard could that be? like how hard could that be is like literally how we've said and gotten this far in the first place. So like, how hard could that be? The answer is like really hard. Like really, really hard.
Because it's not just that, it's the space, it's dressing the space, it's getting the photographers, it's making the prints, it's hanging them, it's promoting them, it's buying the Prosecco and cheese for the opening, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And so suddenly it like snowballs into this thing, but it's like, I don't know, I love photography. It's wonderful. And like, it's given me so much. And so how can I give back to the local photography community, but photography as a whole, without, just like pouring myself into another thing? It's hard to not want to do that, especially at a time right now where it feels like, art is at a odd spot in the market and in the world with, the rise of, like, I can't stop AI from existing. All I can do is control my response to it existing, and, focusing on celebrating other artists and other photographers right now just feels like a thing that would be worth the expense and worth the trouble.
Just to make it clear to our listeners, explain briefly, like, what is the book like in terms of the paper quality, the size? Because I think a lot of times now people are like, hey, I printed a photo book. And you're like, oh, you just went to like one of these, print on demand things. And this is not that.
This is not that.
Yeah, in addition, we only have the PDF to look at, so we haven't seen the physical book. I've seen what it looks like on the website. And you were talking about the spine. This is like a Japanese type spine, et cetera. Tell us about the production.
Yeah, so I'll let Markus handle any parts I don't hit. We produced it with a offset printer in Lithuania, Kopa. They're one of the art house printers in Europe that does really amazing work. We got recommended them through another photo book publisher called Pomegranate Press. They're wonderful. They serve a lower end of the market with like producing really thoughtful zines and magazines. And so it is 120 pages. It's 9 by 12 inches. So, or effectively, 24 by 31 centimeters for your European and non-American listeners. And the paper is a really thick, beautiful paper stock from Sweden called Munken. I said it with the accent just for Markus. And the spine is a open spine with the stitching exposed, with like a embossed cover, thick cardboard stock. It's the cardboard stock that they use to make $2,000 whiskey bottle boxes out of. So when you buy a really, really expensive whiskey, they put it in a box so they can feel better about charging you $2,000. So this is that cardstock, but as the cover of Markus's book. We had the open spine to make it feel a little bit more industrial, to like match the work that's inside, but also to make it feel a little broken, because like if you're not a collector of photo books, having an open spine appear for the first time in your life is like oh shit, you can just do that kind of moment. And that's like a really beautiful little thing. And so there were like a lot of little details that we planned out. Like you mentioned the photo sizing earlier. That wasn't a size of the photo problem. That was a pacing thing that we were trying to solve for. As you're flipping through it, there are certain photos that we want you to spend more time on because they fit thematically, and we want you to feel a certain thing and be referencing images from before. And, we're trying to rhyme the whole body of work through the thing. And one of the easiest ways for us to do that is controlling the size that it appears. And so photos will appear in certain sizes, so you spend a little bit more time or get stopped in your tracks of like, oh, that's huge, or oh, that's small, right? There are a handful of photos that are like really small. They're like, it's in a 9 by 12 inches thing, but the photo itself is like 3 by 4. And it's like, how did that happen? Like, what's happened? But it pauses you in the moment where you need to pause, or it lets you hurry when it needs you to let you hurry. So there are like a lot of little
decisions. And there's more space around the smaller photos as well.
Yeah. And so like letting certain photos breathe and letting certain photos like take over the page was a very intentional design choice that Andre and I made for the pacing of the book. Yeah, it's like it's really a thoughtful art object that happens to be printed as opposed to a fun zine. Like, I love the fun zine, the like beautiful little thing that someone printed at Smart Press or Impex or MX or however many there are, is like a wonderful thing, and every photographer should do it. Do not stop making your zines. If you have made a zine, send me the link. I will buy it. The fastest way to sell me a zine is tell me it exists. But there's also that next level and the level above that of like, okay, every time you go through the process of making a zine, you are improving your work and you are honing in on things that make your work special. And a photo book like this is the result of Markus and I doing that in his work over the course of the last 3 years and reaching something really special. And like, candidly, Markus's work has gotten so much better since we published this that I'm pretty furious. Because like, he has been killing it the last 2 months. And I'm like, where the hell were these when we needed them? It's truly wonderful to see. And, I can't wait to make the next one.
Okay, Daniel Agee, Markus Naarttijärvi, thank you very much for joining us. The book's called Surrender, goodfight.co and not goodfight.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast.